get a handle on the situation. What do you think, Pat?
Kind of half and half. Between like the utopians, they're trying to get they're panicking a little bit, trying to get a handle on society, trying to make it orderly and conformed. But abolitionists are just trying to help the general public.
Okay. All right. Fine. There's an answer. Anybody else want to chime in? Yeah, Jonathan. Really? Mandating that you go to school until a certain age isn't control? To some extent? Mandating that every state provide tax-supported public schools, that's not control? Getting kids off the street and giving them an education in order to keep them from committing crimes, is that not control? I'm just giving you something to think about, Jonathan. Your answer wasn't incorrect. Education does improve the individual. Health does improve the individual. But you can also make the argument. A good lawyer can make the argument both ways. Health does control society. It gets a handle on disease. It gets a handle on social problems like that. But it also extends life. Good for the individual. It all depends on how you argue it. It all depends on how you argue it. Anybody else? Yeah. No? Everybody looks dead. Wake up. Thank you. Wake up. All right, so we've talked about so far the competing goals here, perfecting society, making the world a better place, or establishing social control. We've seen the romantic impulses culturally through the art, through the literature. By romantic I mean emotional. Emotional. That's romantic. Emotional. We've talked a little bit about transcendentalism, did we not? We looked at what transcendentalism is. Did we get into Emerson? Did we get into Thoreau?
Yes.
All right. You say, Pat, that you think that the transcendentalists are trying to control society. Why?
Just because what they're doing isn't really they're benefiting the individual. It's more of a trying to get a hold on society and form it to create a perfect society.
What are they trying to get a hold of? I'm not sure. It's still lost.
The changes in
What changes? What changes?
In the changing ideals that.
I still don't know what changing ideals you're talking about. You haven't said anything specific. What changes are taking place that would compel utopians to want to create a more perfect society? What are they looking at? What are they seeing in society that may be a problem? Industrialism, there you go, the factory system. Hey, they treat their workers like crap. Maybe we could create a better society that treats our workers better and gets a handle on how to conduct the workplace better. Because workers working in these factories under lousy conditions, they're getting rebellious, they want to cause strikes, they want to get violent. Some of them are talking about violence or something like that. So maybe that's a goal. That's something specific. That's something you can hang your hat on. But to just say they're reacting to the changes, I don't know what changes anybody's referring to. You need to be specific. What else about the utopians? What else might they be reacting to? What are the transcendentalists advocating? Yeah. Well, through self-reliance, through themselves and their own strengths and what they know and what they experience, what can they do? They can become a better person. They can discover their inner light. To what end? To make the world a better place and defend the world against ignorance. So yes, it is talking about self-improvement, but to the end of spreading education and getting rid of ignorance around the rest of the world. Because ignorance causes problems. All right. So we've looked at self-reliance. We looked at American Scholar. Why did I go to this? Nope. All right. Did we get to Thoreau? All right, fine. Utopianism, we get here? All right. Different models of different types of utopian societies. For instance, Robert Owen, New Harmony. Okay? Here's a key player, besides Emerson and Thoreau. Trying to create a model factory, a model community. Okay? He had done this in Scotland. He had created a model community. The workers lived where they manufactured whatever it was they were manufacturing. Everybody earned a decent wage. Everybody shared in the ownership of the facility. The children of the people who worked there were provided with an education by the facility. You were provided with free medical care. And when you retired, you received an old age pension from the company. So you were basically taken care of cradle to grave. That was the goal. And that it was the business's responsibility, in conjunction with the workers, working together to do that. Owen did that in Scotland and brought that model here to the United States, where it fell flat on its face. Because he couldn't get the funding for it. This was the vision. I think they were able to build one building. Because they couldn't get the financing for it. There weren't enough people who were willing to embrace this idea. Why? Why wouldn't Americans embrace that idea? Yeah.
Because aside from the benefits, it kind of sounds like communism. Everyone kind of, it's owned by everybody.
Okay, there is an independent streak in Americans. There is this emphasis on the individual, and this sounds very communal. This sounds very socialistic in nature, and it is, because the business is providing a decent wage. It's making sure that the workers have a part in the ownership of the business. It's providing you with education. It's providing you with housing. It's providing you with food. It's providing you with health care. And it's providing you with an old age pension, and you're not even working. You're getting money. But isn't that a lot of what is provided today? I mean, Owen's a man at least 150 years ahead of his time. I mean, providing an old age pension? What's that? That's Social Security. You don't get that into law until 1935 as part of the New Deal. So you've got that idea for a utopian community. Then you get, well, and I think I showed you this map here, that this is where a lot of the utopian communities were. And did we get to this? Okay. Did we get to Oneida? Oh, all right. This is where we stopped. Okay, so let's just, as kind of a reflection, why do you have all of these utopian communities that seem to be north of the Mason-Dixon line, north of the Ohio River? Yeah. It's where all the factories are. So if utopians are trying to create a model society in reaction to the factory system that has emerged, that is a reason.
It's where most of the people are.
It's where most of the people are, and not just the native-born Americans, but the German immigrants, the Irish immigrants, they're coming to America. They're changing the complexity of American society, and people might be reacting to that. Guys, have you ever seen your grandparents try to work a computer? Have you ever seen your grandparents try to work a DVD player? Why is it funny? Why are you smiling? Because why? But why? Huh?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
We grew up with the electronics and we've known how to use it ever since like we were born, where they came sort of towards the middle. So they're not used to the electronics.
They're not used to it.
We're required to adapt to it.
They have to adapt to it, and as you get older, it becomes harder and harder to adapt to changes, technological changes, societal changes. I mean, think about your old racist grandmother. Come on, think about your old racist grandmother. They can't handle the fact that there's a black president, right? I mean, come on. Don't tell me there isn't a relative out there, posting their red state Fox News stuff every day on Facebook, just waiting for the day that Obama's out of office. Okay? Because people have trouble grappling with change. They can't handle it. They can't deal with it. That's why you're seeing a lot of these utopian communities. Not just to improve the individual condition, but because they're reacting to all of this change, the economic change, the social change, the political change, the cultural change. And for some people, it's too much. The world's a big, scary place. And so they go into these communities where they can develop their own values, their own norms, their own culture. And they can, live there in a nice, isolated, protected area. Now, I mean, you've got all sorts of things. I mean, here's your New Harmony colony in Indiana. All right? Model business community. Here is your Brook Farm community outside of Boston. Okay? Model intellectual community. But a lot of these are religious. A lot of them are religious. Okay? And based on a number of different things. Like, for instance, the Shakers. Look at where the Shakers are. There are a lot of them here in New England, some out here in Ohio, and you can see the population movement from east to west. You can see those ideas flowing east to west. Did anybody come across what the Shakers are? Does anybody know what a Shaker is? Related to a Quaker. Shakers were founded by a woman named Mother Ann Lee back in the 1700s, and her basic ideology was that in order to live a perfect life, in order to live a perfect spiritual life and get in contact with God, you needed to, wait for it, abstain from sexual relations. That was the key to salvation, abstinence. How many Shaker communities can you throw a rock and hit today? Not many.
They ain't got no kids.
They didn't have kids. Amazing. That's why the Shaker communities died out. Now, on the flip side of that, if there were a mirror image to the Shaker community, you would get something that looks like the following. And please, if anybody has a weak constitution, I beg you right now to gird yourself for this one. The Oneida community. The Oneida community, founded by John Humphrey Noyes. If Mother Ann Lee and the Shakers were interested in abstinence, Noyes is the exact opposite. Noyes believes that the key to salvation is free love and complex marriage. Guys, if you just take a look at some of the rules of the Oneida community, you'll understand what I'm talking about. For instance, complex marriage. Every man is married to every woman. So therefore, if you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. It's a free-for-all. Some of the other things here get a little creepy-deepy. For instance, the idea of birth control was called male continence. This was a form of birth control where during and after sexual intercourse, the male could not. Yeah. Yeah. There are a lot of people walking around that community, I think, going, ascending fellowship. Here's where it gets really creepy-deepy. This is where young virgins in the community were brought into the complex marriage system by the other godly members of the society who would take on an apprentice. I look at this and I'm just like, man, this is just an excuse for a bunch of old pervs and cougars to shack up with young kids. But they were going to be responsible for their sexual spirituality. Oh, this is actually the part of the community I like. Mutual criticism. This is where each member of the community was reprimanded in front of the group. And basically, it's like the Festivus airing of grievances. This is why you stink. Let us tell you all the reasons why you're terrible. But they did believe in the equality of the sexes. Males and females were treated equally, and Noyes said, "Oh, don't worry about the second coming of Jesus. It's already happened. So have fun, guys. What must it have been like to live in a community like this?" Gates, what's your reaction? It's crazy, absolutely crazy, bonkers. If you're a child born in this community, how might you turn out? Messed up. That's correct. I give you Charles Guiteau, a product of the Oneida community, and the assassin of James Garfield. Yes, it screws people up. Charles Guiteau was certifiable. Nuts. By the way, all of these utopian communities they had to manufacture stuff in order to survive. I mean, you could have all the great ideas in the world. Abstinence, free love, model business community, whatever. You could have anything you want as an idea, but in order for the society to survive, you needed to make money. So pretty much a lot of these utopian communities found something they were really good at and made it really well. So, for instance, the Shakers manufactured hand-carved furniture. And if you go on an antique road show or anything like that, you'll find that, if you ever come across a Shaker piece, they are extremely valuable because they're rare. There aren't a lot of Shakers out there. So what did the Oneida community come up with? I'll bet you a lot of you have it in your home. Silverware. Silverware. That's what they manufactured. Oneida silverware. When Noyes died in the late 1800s, his son, by the way, he had like 40 kids.
Big surprise.
Big surprise. But his sons, who inherited the community, said, "Yeah, all this stuff is nuts. This is crazy. Why don't we junk this and concentrate on the silverware?" And they made millions from it. They still manufacture silverware today. But this is where their origins lie. And a lot of people have Oneida silverware in their drawers at home. And then you've got other religious experiments that also raise an eyebrow or two. For instance, the Mormons, they practiced polygamy. And that was something that concerned a lot of people. Polygamy was not generally, given the thumbs up. Okay, it was generally frowned upon. And as such, the Mormons, which had been founded up in, I think, like Putney, Vermont, they had moved from upstate New York to Ohio to Missouri to Nauvoo, Illinois. It was in Nauvoo, Illinois that the founder of the Mormon faith, Joseph Smith, was killed in his jail cell. He was arrested and imprisoned for polygamy in Nauvoo, Illinois, and in the middle of the night, a crowd came to the jail and killed him. It was up to Joseph Smith's second-in-command to find a safe harbor for the Mormons. And who was the second-in-command? Brigham Young. And it's Brigham Young who is going to lead them out to Utah. I mean, who else would decide to live in the middle of a desert next to a lake filled with water you can't drink? That's why they moved there, because they didn't think anybody else would move there. And the Mormons established a community in Salt Lake City. And over the course of the 19th century, the Mormons are trying to establish their own Mormon state there. As a matter of fact, this is what the Mormons claimed as their state. This area in yellow, they wanted to call it Deseret. They eventually settle on Utah. And part of the condition for Utah statehood in the late 1800s was that they had to forego polygamy. So polygamy, gone, technically. However, some Orthodox Mormon communities, and on Big Love on HBO, it is still practiced. Yeah.
It's like actually illegal, right?
It is illegal, yes.
And how do people do it? Like there's a show.
They, what, the sister mothers and all that? Yeah.
Like,
Sister wives, yeah. They still do it.
how do they do that?
They do it quietly.
They have a TV show that's not very quiet.
That's true. Yeah, that's a problem. I don't know what to tell you there. I have no idea. So now look, why are you seeing all this religiosity and attempt at creating different religious communities? Why is this happening now? Yeah. Exactly. This is in the midst of the Second Great Awakening, and what is the key goal of the Second Great Awakening?
That the individual achieves salvation.
Exactly. It emphasizes the individual's ability to achieve salvation. And some people say, hey, look, I've got my own interpretation of religion. Noyes says, I've got my interpretation. Joseph Smith says, I've got my interpretation. William Miller and the Millerites.
Are they on here? No.
Okay. William Miller and the Millerites say, no, we've got our interpretation. Hey, by the way, anybody ever hear of William Miller? He predicted the end of the world, calculated it mathematically from the Bible, predicted the end of the world to be like October 10th, 1843. Everybody dressed in their robes, went to the top of the hill, waited for the sunrise, waited for the second coming, and when it didn't come, he said, oh, I forgot to carry the one. It's this day. And he kept pushing it back and pushing it, but finally they just decided, you know what, his math is incorrect. But the Millerites became what are known as the Seventh-day Adventists. So there is this, what's the word I'm looking for? Balkanization or shattering of the religious, I'm trying to not bifurcation, that's a division. Where things shatter into small pieces. Sure. All right, fine. There's an explosion of different little religions, religious communities that come out of this Second Great Awakening. And you see a lot of them up here in New England and upstate New York, because that's where a lot of the change is taking place. We've talked about the Second Great Awakening before. Not only are they emphasizing the individual and self-salvation, how does the individual achieve self-salvation in the Second Great Awakening? What is also emphasized? Through their actions in doing what? Social reform. And using the political system as a means to change society and, in their minds, improve it. So what are the things that some of these reformers are seeking to do? What do they want to end, or what do they want to do? Yeah. They want to ban the consumption of alcohol. That's the temperance movement. What else do they want to do? What is the goal of any religion? Huh? Yeah, well, yeah, go to heaven. To convert people. See, you know. Absolutely. The goal of any religion is to get more people involved. So if they go around to these camp meetings and get converts to whatever religious faith, whether it's a Protestant faith, Baptist, Methodist, Lutherans, Millerites, Mormons, whatever, you're seeing a lot of traveling preachers going around trying to convert the faithful to their way of thinking. Charles Grandison Finney, probably the most well-known of the Second Great Awakening preachers. Are these guys successful? And I haven't really addressed that. The Utopians, the Second Great Awakening, the Transcendental. Are the Transcendentalists successful in achieving what they want? Where do you not find success with Transcendentalists? Where do you see failure?
So they had a lot of ideas, like their hippie ideas, but they didn't want to work.
I mean, how many of you here are practicing Transcendentalists looking to achieve the oversoul? Okay, none of you, exactly. So, I mean, you can see the level of success. Were they successful at anything? I mean, Brook Farm, the community failed. Were they successful at anything? The writers were successful, and you guys are, I mean, you're charged with, when you are either in high school or when you go to college, you're charged with reading Emerson. So, I mean, the ideas of Emerson, the ideas of self-reliance and individual achievement and hard work, those ideas are out there in the zeitgeist. You just don't know that they're transcendentalist ideas. Yeah.
They were moderately successful in spreading their ideas, but they didn't really do any work to maintain themselves.
Yeah, and that was the big problem. That was the big problem with the Transcendentalist community, was that they didn't do the work to upkeep the community. Brook Farm, yeah, you got all these Transcendentalists together, and they're sitting around stroking their beards, clucking their tongues, thinking about life, but they're not doing anything to make the community work. You gotta, get the eggs, milk the cows, pick the turnips, whatever it is, and nobody wants to do any of the work, because everybody's too important, everybody's too busy thinking. What about the Utopians? Were they successful? Yeah. Who? after 6 years? Well, that's Brook Farm. You were painting with a very broad brush right there. Yeah.
They were slightly successful because some, like the Mormons, they're still around today. They're still spreading their beliefs, trying to convert people. But some, like Brook Farms and all that, they just kind of died out.
Okay, some experience a level of success, others kind of die out. Okay, the New Harmony experiment dies out. Brook Farm dies out. Mormons are still around. What about this idea of the Second Great Awakening, of getting people more engaged in their own spirituality, self-salvation, getting people engaged in the political process to achieve reform? Is that successful? Guys, I'm going to stand here and wait for an answer. Yeah.
It was very successful. Because it revitalized the belief that the individual can find salvation.
Sure, absolutely. It's extraordinarily popular. Yeah.
Era of common man, more people getting involved in the politics. That might have something to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you say that they're fighting for temperance. Do you eventually get temperance? Eventually. They're also fighting for abolition. Do you get abolishment of slavery? Yeah, eventually. Do you get people more engaged religiously? Yes. So they're successful. Eric, what were you going to say?
It was really popular with African American women.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Women and African Americans are involved in the Second Great Awakening in a way that you didn't see during the First Great Awakening. Absolutely. Because women and African Americans both have their goals that they're trying to achieve. The abolishment of slavery, women's rights, women's education, opportunity for women. Okay, so yeah, I would argue that the Second Great Awakening is pretty successful indeed. A lot of the preachers came out of this area of upstate New York called the Burned Over District. And it's called the Burned Over District because of the fiery rhetoric, the preaching, the fire and brimstone, the stern warnings to make sure you get right with Jesus and God, otherwise you're going to go to HE double hockey sticks. And guys, a lot of the religious groups come out of upstate New York. A lot of the reform movements come out of upstate New York. You've got a lot of, look at all the anti-slavery churches up here in upstate New York. And Seneca Falls. What happened at Seneca Falls? The Women's Rights Conference at Seneca Falls. This is the epicenter of reform. A lot of the radical abolitionists come out of upstate New York. A lot of the women's rights activists live in upstate New York. A lot of the Underground Railroads, the final stop is upstate New York. All right, here's one area where reformers are trying to, marry reform and religion for the banning of the consumption of alcohol, what's called temperance. Now, this is a very popular cartoon that was produced at the time. It's called Drunkard's Progress, and it was used as propaganda to try to convince Americans of the badness of alcohol. You see the poor woman and her child down here as her husband goes through all of the stages of Drunkard's Progress. Now, I know the words are difficult to sing, but can you see what this guy is up to? What's happening here? Starting to drink. What's happening here? He's hitting on other women. Not his wife. What's happening here? Getting into bar fights. layabout. What happens here? He's looking old, he's looking ragged, he's lost his job, he's fallen into poverty. So what happens here? Crime, he's robbing people. And finally, he blows his brains out. Yeah, it's kind of radical. But it's trying to show you, well, actually, what do temperance, by looking at this, what do temperance advocates believe will happen if they can ban alcohol?
Get rid of all crime.
Crime will fall, poverty will fall, marriages will be more secure, children will be taken care of. Okay? But they believe that alcohol is at the root of all these other myriad social problems. So therefore, if they can ban alcohol, all these other problems will fix themselves. And I would argue that the leading advocates for temperance were women. Because they were the victims of the problems that were caused by drunkenness. Cheating husbands, husbands that lose their job, the family becomes poor and destitute, the children are forced to go to work, they have to drop out of school, their husband, winds up getting involved in crime or whatever. It's women who are advocating for the banning of alcohol and other very religious people, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to establish a morality in America to make people gooder. Does it work? Take a look at the data. 1720, 1770, 1820, 1870, 1920. Does it work? Yes! I mean, here's 1820. Boom. The beginning of the temperance movement. The convincing of Americans that they should probably temper, that's where the word temperance comes from, that they should temper their consumption of alcohol. And through that moral persuasion, it is generally successful. The first state law is Maine, 1851. Neil S. Dow passes something called the Maine Law, which Maine becomes the first state in the Union to ban alcohol. That is then going to spread to other states until by 1920, you get the 18th Amendment in 1920. The 18th Amendment is the beginning of Prohibition. Alcohol banned nationwide, and it was a rousing success. Just watch Boardwalk Empire. Yeah.
Let's say, wasn't the point of temperance to stop the effects that alcohol had on people?
Correct.
Effects?
Yeah.
Didn't prohibition just make it worse?
Yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you look at Prohibition,
Goes up.
goes up. Alcohol consumption goes up. Why?
If you ban it, people want to get around the system and
Damn right. There you go. When you make something illegal, it makes it all the more interesting. If you legalize it, you actually drop the consumption. Because there's no longer a mystery about it. I mean, how many people smoke cigarettes out there? Smoking has dropped off precipitously. All right. Here's another area where where people are advocating change. Public health. What were the goals of the public health folks? What were they trying to do? Hey folks, I'm done with this today, whether I'm done or not. So you can chime in, or you can be left hanging and take a test on Friday where we haven't covered stuff. What are the goals of the public health sector? Yeah. Why? Yeah. Okay, to prevent the spread of disease, to prevent the spread of epidemics. Guys, smallpox, typhus, cholera, all of these things spread around the country with abandon. And people didn't understand why. It took understanding the nature of contagion and what it was, and the emphasis of reformers to try to convince people to wash their hands, to be sanitary. Guys, there was something during the Civil War called the U.S. Sanitary Commission, literally trying to convince people to be clean because it would stop the spread of disease. Yeah.
Didn't people used to think it was bad to bathe?
Yeah, they thought it was bad to bathe. No, they're emphasizing bathing and cleaning and making sterilization. The understanding that disease was actually a microbe, a virus, a bacteria, that becomes popular in the mid-1800s. And so you are going to start to see the control of the spread of disease, which means what for people? They're going to live longer. Now, you also had people like Sylvester Graham who were advocating dietary reform. Sylvester Graham was a vegetarian. He believed that meat led to sexual excesses. Your battery is running low, just letting you know. He also believed that ketchup and mustard caused insanity. Why? I don't know. But he did advocate for eating more fruits and vegetables and being healthy. He advocated exercise. And he started experimenting with different types of grains and foods to make a better food for people. And what you get out of it is the graham cracker. And you had other nutritionists out there, like J.H. Kellogg. Kellogg experimented with different foodstuffs. As a matter of fact, he founded a resort, if you want to, more like a spa, in Battle Creek, Michigan. And you would pay money to go there. And you would be given a diet prescribed by J.H. Kellogg. You would be given a regimen of exercise. You would be given massages and all other things like that. And you would be given daily enemas of yogurt. A yogurt enema. 2 quarts of yogurt going in the wrong direction. Because he believed that but he believed correctly that yogurt improved your digestion, that it helped with digestion. He was just putting it in the wrong way. And people flocked there. Now, in his spare time, with his brother William, J.H. Kellogg was also experimenting with grains and cereals and whatnot, and happened to invent the cornflake. We have the cornflakes, we forget the enemas. But science in the 1800s is part scientific and part accident, craziness, eccentricity. Let's see here. Public education. Horace Mann. When you think public education and reformers in the antebellum period, you got to think Horace Mann. Horace Mann was a Massachusetts educator who advocated the creation of tax-supported public schools. He believed in creating a secular curriculum. He wanted to get religion out of the public school system and teach people math, science, English, philosophy. He believed that every community should support a public school and believed that children should go to public school for a certain amount of time. Now, I think back in the day, it was like up to 3rd grade, or maybe 6th grade. Today, compulsory education is to the age of 16. Some people want to make it 18. But Horace Mann is going to be successful in Massachusetts, and this idea is going to spread around the country. And he said, look, we can't just have anybody teaching in these public schools. We need to have teachers who are specifically trained in the field that they are teaching, who understand the brains of children. And so he advocated the creation of a series of normal schools, colleges, to train teachers to teach. Every state eventually wound up having normal schools, including Maryland. There are 3 normal schools in Maryland that are still around today. Salisbury, Towson, and Frostburg. Salisbury took care of the Eastern Shore, Towson took care of Central Maryland, Frostburg took care of the western part of the state. I went to a normal school. Actually, it was right now it's called the College of New Jersey. When I went there, it was called Trenton State College, but it started in 1855 as Trenton Normal School to train teachers. And what would you read or what would you study when you went to one of these schools? More likely than not, you would get a McGuffey reader. William McGuffey wrote a lot of the reading and writing textbooks that people used throughout the 1800s and into the early 1900s. You would practice reading, you would practice writing, you would have to know spelling and grammar. And and a lot of the stories in these McGuffey readers had elements